All right, so just before we get started, I'll just tell you a couple things. Try doing that every time you sit down for a session. It's just almost amazing the number of people you'll meet. And one of the things I do is I set a goal of trying to meet 3 new people a day. Once I get to that goal, then I can go hide in the back and go back to being the introvert for a while, because that's kind of my natural state too. So I'm Andy Warren. Today we're going to talk about building a professional development plan. So I wrote this presentation a couple years ago, and the goals I set then I still like. One of the things I want to do today is to convince you to write down your plan. Not just to have an idea in your head, but actually do some significant work to write down a plan. And I'm going to show you why that makes sense. The other part is I want to talk to you just a little bit about branding. And branding is one of those buzzwords that gets abused a little bit, and I'm sure I'm going to be guilty of that at times. But I'm going to show you how trying to decide what your brand is, how it combines with building your professional development plan. And as we do that, we're going to talk about all the things that I think go into a PDP. So it's really designed to be a high-level session to get you thinking about the idea of having a plan and how you might build it, but it's not going to be a walkthrough to go step by step by step. This is what should be in your plan. Right? It's really a door-opening session. So there's a lot of different ways to describe a professional development plan, but I started with something that I deliberately wanted to sound like a corporate mission statement. And you'll see why that analogy becomes interesting in a while. But at the end, what I'm trying to get you to do is to write more than just a professional development plan. I'm trying to get you to write a personal business plan. One of the themes you're going to hear today is you've got to think of yourself as a business. And businesses can't just be one thing. They've got to really have a lot of different attributes. And as businesses evolve, as your careers evolve, you're going to have to focus your time on different things to accommodate the needs of your customer, even if the only customer you have is your employer. So how many of you out there have a professional development plan right now? Something that you've written or that you've written in conjunction with your employer? So I only see a handful of hands. So not to pick on you, but why don't the rest of you have a professional development plan? Does it seem like something you should have? I'm betting that's why you're here. You feel like you've got a gap, right? It's something that you haven't been doing. You want to fill that in. So I talked to a lot of people about this, and I picked some of the reasons that I hear, and I want to talk about those a little bit because I think they'll help you understand that in order to do this successfully, you have to reorient a little bit. So I think the first thing that I run into is that most of us expect our managers to tell us what we need to be good at, where we need to improve. How many of you would agree with that? Do you think your manager should do that? Okay, not too many. That's good because those days, I'm not sure if they ever existed, but they're over now, right? Managers really tend to look at people as resources. I'm not saying that's good management, but that's kind of how the world works. And so they really expect you to analyze your skills, figure out where you can add value, how you can take care of your career. They are not going to look after your career. This really impacts beginners, people in that 0 to 5 year zone, because they so desperately want that feedback and they so rarely get it. Some of them figure it out on their own, some of them never do. And that's where you need a PDP, but you wind up in a loop going, how do I get there if I don't know what I need to do? The next one, and I have these conversations all the time, and especially at events like this, is they go, well, I'm a junior developer, I'm a senior DBA, what's my next step? We don't really have a good sense of where our career is going to take us, and that's a tremendously hard question. Do I want to become a consultant? Do I want to become maybe a super senior, that distinguished engineer type? Do I want to move into management, right? That's certainly a path to, in some cases, more money, more responsibility. So it's hard to write a plan if we don't know where we want to go. And without knowing where we're going to go, right, we just don't get there. So let's say that I told you that my goal was to become a CIO. What would my path look like? Right? It's not a simple path. CIOs get there by a variety of paths, just like most of you got to your job today by a variety of paths. So even once you know your goal, it takes a lot of work to figure out how to get there. How many people in here do BI work right now? Okay? So about half of you do BI and half of you do the other side. So imagine that I asked you to change to DBA type work or development type work. Think about how wrenching that shift would be. It would help if you had someone to lay out that course for you, right? Because just as an outsider looking in at being a network engineer, right, something way off to the side, you go, well, I'm certainly smart enough to do it, but I just don't know where to start. What are the things I should do? What should I read? Then we get to the human side of it. We don't like setting goals because there's some risk involved. Right? Now, I'd be willing to bet most of you set New Year's resolutions, right? It's kind of, it's the American way at least. I'm sure we've got some people in here from outside the U.S., and I imagine they do largely the same. But those aren't really serious goals. It's entirely human to resist setting goals because we might not get there. It's not a hard one to overcome, especially when you follow a process to get to the goal where you feel like the goal is achievable. Nobody teaches us how to do this either. Right? I mean, if you think about it, that's why you're here today, is to learn some more about this, to get some ideas. And that's a great place to start, is to recognize a gap. But when we look at it, we go, well, why didn't they teach us this in high school? Why didn't they teach us this in the first job? Why didn't they teach us this the first time I got promoted? And it's because we've got a whole generation that hasn't done this, and so we're not passing the information down. The tribal system isn't working for us. All right? So all these things contribute to the fact that most of us don't have a very good vision of where we're going to be in 12 months, 24 months, 60 months. So I'd be willing to bet most of you came in here thinking a professional development plan is really about, well, I need to learn some new feature in Denali, always on, or I want to learn something about analysis services, or I want to learn performance tuning. Those are all good goals, but they're just a segment of your career. Now, if you're in year one of your career, you're focused on syntax, right? You're trying to understand queries and how the engine works and how do you do a backup and all those very technical linguistic things. By year 5, you're getting comfortable, and now you're starting to think about, am I using the product in the right way? I want to dig into some kind of the internals and understand how I can solve some problems more efficiently. And maybe by year 10 or year 15, you've really got to the point where databases are a commodity. You just look at them as providing a service, and maybe you're not as interested in all that stuff anymore. Those are all phases we go through. But as you look at your career in year 1, how much time do you spend networking? Probably, like this much, right? You've got a job, you're working really hard at it. In year 10, networking should be a much bigger slice of that pie because you've got to get ready for the next opportunity. Right? You're networking across departments. Maybe you're looking for the next job. Maybe you're a consultant looking for the next gig that you're going to do as an employer. So it makes more sense later in your career to spend more time on networking, but not early. The same for project management. How many of you do real project management right now? And that makes sense because most of us, we do work. We like the feeling of doing work. But at some point, we're going to play on a project team, or we may even be asked to lead a project. Become a technical lead on something. We're doing some kind of big upgrade, some kind of systems change. So those are all things that are just the beginnings of the pieces that we go into the PDP that aren't just technology, right? Because when I say project management, it's learning how to use Microsoft Project, sure, or whatever software you want to use, but it's also all the language and how it works, and then actually running projects to build those skills. It doesn't make sense to do that in year 1, but it can be incredibly valuable year 5 or year 10. So it has everything in there that you need for the next 12 months. Right? We're going to take a look at where we stand today and go, out of all the things that I'd like to learn, I'm going to kind of balance those out, and this is what I'm going to learn. And then it's got goals, milestones, and tasks. Now that starts to sound an awful lot like the world you live in at work, right? You've got a project plan. And so that's the paradigm I want you to think about is, why shouldn't it be a project plan, right? That's a paradigm we all know. If we want to get to a goal, we want milestones. We want some hours projections. We want to know what the costs are. And so I haven't invented a new wheel for you here today. What I'm going to try to do is to get you to map the idea that you have to how you solve this problem, to how you solve your problem, right? We're essentially going to build a project plan, right? So in the end, we want that total package to be the plan for how we get to where we want to be 12 months, 24 months down the road. Questions so far? Is this about what you expected today? Too fast, too slow? Everybody tired waiting on the cookies? A little bit? All right. Okay, so in order to really do a good job of building a professional development plan, you have to take ownership of your career. I think a lot of us talk about that, but what does that really mean, owning our career? So for me, it's starting to ask ourselves some of these hard questions that I've got up here. What's going to be the next job that you search for? How many of you could answer that question right now? Right? It's a hard question, right? Is the next job you get going to be within your company? Right? Because if you work for Google, Microsoft, IBM, maybe anybody in the Fortune 500, there's going to be tons of opportunities for lateral and promotions within the company. If you work at some 500-person company, odds are if you want to do anything different, you have to go somewhere else. And that's important to think about, is to go, do I want to stay with this company, and am I willing to change my skill set in order to do it? Am I learning skills that only apply at my current job? How many people feel like that's the case right now? Right? And I bet if you think about it, over time you'll realize that you're getting more and more siloed. Most DBAs, most BI people end up using a very narrow set of skills to provide a very focused set of solutions for their employer, for their customer, because that's what they want, and they get paid a premium for doing that. But over time, you get more and more siloed because you're working on replication and clustering, and they don't care about log shipping and full text search. And so you gradually, those skills weaken, and you're not using them. So you have to think about, am I staying balanced? Do I care about that? Right? It could be that you're making a ton of money just being a clustering person, and you go, no, that's my niche. And if you've made that decision, that's certainly okay. Am I excited about my career right now? How many of you would say you are excited about your career right now? That's pretty good, but a bunch of you aren't, right? Maybe you've been doing it for a while, maybe working too many hours. And so one of the things you have to think about is to go, am I not excited because I'm just tired, right? I've been up-tempo for a while and I need to slow down. You're here to recharge and learn a little bit. Or is it really time for a transition? And that transition might be, I've been on call for a while and I want to move to a job where I'm not on call. Maybe it's where I've been doing, break-fix stuff and I want to do some design. Or maybe it's time to go back to school because I want to be a veterinarian or a librarian. Or, you really want to change careers. If you're not excited, that's worth thinking about, right? As to why am I not excited? What can I do to fix it? Right? So I want the PDP to really embody all of that, because you can't write the PDP without knowing some of the answers. Right? Some of life is what I like to call happenstance. Right? You react to things that come along. Right? Happened to me this year. Someone I worked for years ago called and asked me to come do some work for 9 months, totally away from SQL Server. Right? No part of my career plan. Right? But I looked at it and it was just a really interesting opportunity to work with someone that I really liked. And I said, you know what? I can survive a 9-month break in my career. I'm going to go over here and do this because I think it'll work for me long term. But it wasn't part of my PDP. Right? I'm not even sure it's good for my career long term, but it's a bet. Right? I looked at it and said, I want to do this. So there's a measure of happenstance in life, and your plan doesn't have to be a contract. Right? You can renegotiate that plan anytime you want. There's nothing wrong with that. So now we get to really the heart of what I want you to think about. If I could get you to do one thing when you leave here, it's to leave with this mindset. And that's to think of yourself as a business of one. Right? Whether you work for a consulting company, whether you work for an employer, whether you work for yourself, you're a business of one. And what that means is you have to constantly think about what's your place in the market, what are your skills, which of those skills will get you paid, which ones will get you the next job, all of those things. The same as if you ran the pizza shop down the street, right? You're a business of one. Because as soon as you take ownership of your career to that extent, to go, no, I work for me. You write my check, but I work for me. It totally changes how you approach things and how you prioritize things. Because even though maybe your boss right now would like you to go learn about, let's say, Hadoop, right? Maybe you decide that you want to go learn about something else. Right? Because you're not using it right then. Or maybe the boss has no intention of using Hadoop, but you saw the keynote this morning and you think, you know what? I need to go make that investment. I'm going to do that for me as a business, because if Microsoft's going that way, I need to be a little better prepared, right? So it's moving away a little bit from just blind loyalty. You certainly want to be loyal to your clients, to your employer, but that doesn't mean that your interests are always 100% aligned. And that takes a little bit, right? Because we've kind of been taught to be loyal, right? To kind of, ride for the brand all the way back to, the old Western days. And certainly there's times for that, but when you set goals, you have to really look and go, where do I want to be over the long term? So as you start thinking about this, look at those questions I've got up there, and those are also designed to be hard questions, right? Am I paid appropriately today? How many people here today think they're paid appropriately? So I'm just going to guess that the rest of you are underpaid. I mean, I know I'm going out on a limb there, but I'm guessing that you're underpaid. How do you know if you're underpaid or overpaid? The truth is it's pretty hard to figure out. Most of the time, a good way to find out is user group, having peers, outside the company, right? It's an awkward question to ask inside the company. But if you talk to me afterward, we might can ballpark, if you're in there. Strangely in our business, we don't publish a lot of salary surveys, and we should probably talk about changing that because it would definitely help people to understand, even when you're interviewing, how much to ask for can really be a challenge, because if you pick the wrong number, trying to be fair, you may actually hurt your ability to get the position. So are my skills current and marketable? This is the challenge I like to throw. Let's say that you come back for the conference Monday, and you come in the office and they hand you the box, right? Thanks for coming back. Hope you enjoyed the trip, but we don't need you anymore. Are you ready to look for that next job? Or are you going to start scrambling, realizing that you've been pigeonholed for 5 years or 10 years, and you're not really ready to go out there and do interviews to be a SQL Server DBA or BI person or SSS or whatever kind of your specialty is right now? Because you don't want to be in that place. You don't want to be afraid of walking in the door and getting the box, right? Because it could happen to any of us through no fault of our own. Company downsizes, changes missions, right? You want to be prepared. So are they current and are they marketable, right? Marketable is the key. I know a lot of people that use Microsoft Access. I'm sure maybe not some of your favorite tools. They use it well, and they use it to great advantage for an employer, but it's a very specialized solution for that one employer. If they had to pick up and find a job the next week later, those skills would not translate to anywhere near the salary that they're getting paid. They're not marketable. They can be very current in their skills, but they're not marketable. What can I do to increase my value? And that's kind of a close cousin to am I paid appropriately? What would you do today if you set a real goal of saying, in a year, I want to make 10% more money? I want to increase my salary by 10%, assuming that the most you're going to get as a raise is 5%. Where do you get that other 5% from? What skill can you acquire that you could go back to your employer and say, see, I'm worth another $5,000 a year? That's not easy to figure out, but when you're running your own business, that's the way you think, right? You go, I've only got X hours in a week. I don't want to work more hours. I want to get paid more per hour. So at the end, what is my brand? I talked about this a little bit in the beginning. What is my brand? And, you've all heard about the elevator pitch, right? You meet somebody in the elevator, what do you do? What do you tell them? Am I a DBA? Am I a DBA that specializes in high availability? Am I the jack of all trades? Do I like replication? What does that elevator pitch look like? Because everything you do that you put time into should support that statement, or you should be changing the statement, right? If you go, well, I'm a DBA that likes to do high availability, but you're spending all your time learning full text search, there's a disconnect, right? It's not to say you might not need both skills, but you have to really think about it to go, should I be learning this if I'm really about HA? Or should I be telling people, no, I provide high-level services, right? Because you don't want to go to a pizza place and see that they also serve burgers, tacos, steaks, Italian food, right? You go, well, that doesn't seem right. It says it's a pizza place, but it's not, right? So starting to understand what your brand is, all the way down to what does your manager see you as, which is often different than what we think we are, right? You think you're the superstar DBA, or you think you're highly reliable, or you think you're the great coder. Does your employer, does your client see you the same way? right? And if you're projecting a different brand, you have to figure that out because you really want them to see you the way for what you are, right? For what you think you're providing. All of these are really hard questions, right? And if you think about building a PDP, it's easy to write down the 10 things that you want to learn in 2012. These questions are a couple hours of coffee, tea, your drink of choice staring out a window, right? Because there's some of them that there is no right answer for. Some of them it's very hard to get the answer, but you have to spend the time chewing on it going, excuse me, what's the closest I can get for right now so that I can build a plan that will get me there? So I say building a PDP, but if you read those things, and it's a little bit market speak, it really looks like building a business plan, right? Because that's really what you're doing, right? You're saying, what am I going to do for the next year? What is my business? What is me? What am I going to do, right? And so we're going to go through this little process of going, where am I at? What's my career position? What's my market? What do I have for resources, right? We're back to kind of project management 101. What resources do I have to apply to the problem? How much am I willing to spend? Okay? And as we do this, we're going to iterate. You'll see that as we talk about some of this. Sure. Any questions so far? You're a quiet crowd today. You're killing me. Okay.
Well, my big thought is I don't really know how to answer a lot of these questions. I need a mentor.
Okay. So his question was he doesn't know how to answer the questions. He needs a mentor. You know, that's a start, right? Just going, I want to do, because at least you can say, I want to accomplish this goal, right? Don't think you have to walk out of here knowing all the answers, because I'll be honest, I'm standing up here, I don't know all the answers about my career. I'm the guy who just took a 9-month detour from SQL Server, right? You know, it's not perfect, right? You just want to start asking the questions. I saw a hand back there. Yes, sir.
I was kind of going to say a similar thing, but any tips or discussion in the group about answering some of those questions? What's the skill set that if I focus on it in next year I'll be able to make 15%?
Okay, so his question is, how do I figure out which skill set will let me make 15% more? Well, that's a great example. So I think if I was trying to figure out how to make 15% more, the first place I would look is Monster and Dice, followed up by my local staffing company, right? And I would say, you know, first of all, you know, what positions are you filling all the time? What's the hot job? You know, within SQL Server, right? Within the database world, what jobs are you filling and what do they pay, right? Right there, you know, those guys have their finger on the market, right? I mean, you look at Monster, you look at demand, right? Because if you're a SQL Server person who specializes in, I don't know, let's say service broker, right? You're not going to see a lot of jobs that really map to that skill set. It's a great skill to have, but they're not going to call you because you're the service broker person, right? So to me, that's just one example of doing market research, going, where are there places where I can find out how much people will pay for a pizza, right? Got to dig a little bit. Right? So, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but that's really where I start, is to go look at the market, because, so I'll go into a little bit of an opinion thing here. So imagine that you look at a street, right? You're driving down one of your local main streets and you see 6 pizza places. You've been thinking about opening a pizza place. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Right? Just depends on your point of view, but you know, one of the things you can infer is they eat a lot of pizza here, right? As long as I can fill a different niche, yeah, this is pizza town, right? So you look and see what's popular, right? There's vacancies to fill there. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit earlier, right, about where are we going. And so some of the things I would tell you to think about as you try to figure this out, and these are good conversations to have with your spouse. You'll hear me say that a lot, right? Your significant other, your best friend, you know, if you're not involved. These are questions that you really need that sounding board to think about a little bit. Because especially as you think about where you're going, I just made these groups up, but I think you'll find they fit most of us. Sometimes we're looking for more money, especially if you're in that 20 to 30 age bracket. Moving is not an issue. You don't care about working extra hours. You just want the dollars. You move into your 30s and 40s, your priorities start to shift. right? Those of you who have a small child, right, you know that now stability is what you care about, health insurance. Just knowing that that check is going to go in every 2 weeks because you want to spend time with your kids, right? You get to a point where maybe you're about challenges, right? Especially if you're 5 or 10 years in and you go, you know, I'm essentially making all I can make, right, without moving into management or going on the road, but I want the challenges. I need that mental thing to keep me feeling like I'm doing something and I'm not just grinding away until I retire. And for some of us, we're going to get the itch to have more responsibility, right? There's a little bit of a thing, in the U.S. at least, that if you don't aspire to go into management, you're branded a little bit as a loser, right? That you just don't have ambition. You don't want to fall into that trap. There's nothing wrong with saying that my career path is entirely technical. You're still going to need some management skills, some people skills, but you don't have to go into management, you know, to go the next 10 years of your career. That also doesn't mean that you don't want to take on responsibility, right? There's plenty of ways to be responsible and to exert leadership without being a manager. But on any given day, you're not going to find a job that gives you all of those, right? And so you decide, well, let's rank those. What's the most important thing to me? And it's not hard to figure out, because if you're not sure, ask your spouse, right? Because you know where you're at. You'll go through times where, you know, money's important. There's nothing wrong with that, right? That's why we work. There's times where stability. There's going to be times when they know that you're not happy at work and you need that challenge. You know, you need a way to exert yourself. So your spouse, your best friend, is a great sounding board to really go, where am I at right now? And realizing in 12 months, it might not be the same answer. Nothing wrong with that. So I put this up here because this is a subject I suspect all of us talk about a lot, is how do you change? How do you reposition yourself? And I certainly can't give you a plan in an hour, probably not even a day. But my example here is if you're going to change from being a DBA that does admin stuff to one that does, you know, data warehousing, how do you get that experience, right? Because it's almost like going back to being the year one employee again, right? Nobody wants to hire you because you don't have experience, but you need experience to get hired. Right. That's fair. His point was, especially as you get further into your career, it's harder to find the free time, especially at work, maybe even after work, to experiment. But you start thinking about, you know, what are those skills I need? Where can I find projects, you know, at work, at home, that will let me at least get to the point where I can talk about those skills? This is a great place to engage with the staffing companies, right? Imagine that you're a DBA with 5-6 years experience and you go, you know, I'd like to move into business intelligence. You know, what would I have to know about analysis services for you to send me on an interview, you know, for a mid-level position? Have them interview, right? Have them set up an interview for you just so you figure out what they're going to ask, right? You're kind of back to market research to figure out what skills do I need. But you absolutely have to supplement this with a mentor or someone that kind of fills the role of a mentor, right? It's talking to people at events like this. It's posting something on the forums of your favorite website to go, you know, I'm thinking about transitioning. What books should I read? You know, who are the influencers? Who are the thought leaders in this space? You know, there's some things that you can do there to help you figure out, at least I see where they're at. Now I just have to figure out how to get there. All right? Not easy stuff, though. Okay, so now we get to the part that really is about project management, but it's also about you and your spouse, significant other, and that's what do you have for resources to apply to this program, right? So hopefully by the time you're getting here, you've done some of the deep thinking, the hard stuff, and now you're sitting down, you know, the proverbial kitchen table conversation to go, what do we have for resources? And so you start with time, because time of the two is easier to come by, at least in theory. Now, I made these zones up. You may not agree with them, but I think they kind of illustrate the point that at different times in our career, we're going to want to put different amounts of time into moving ahead, right? And what I find for most people, they fall in that 0 to 20-hour bucket. Their learning really consists of whatever they learn at work to solve a problem, and they have no effort, no interest in doing any other professional development. They go to work. A lot of them are really great employees. They do a stellar job. If there's something new, they figure it out, they execute, they go back to being employees, right? As soon as you decide you want to grow, maybe you step up into 21 and 50 hours. And if you think about it, for sure that puts every one of you here in that bucket this week, right? You're going to get a ton of professional development this week. Some of you, this may be all the professional development you do for a year, and you know what, if you do, that's still okay. Some of you may go back and supplement that watching the online videos, the DVDs, newsletters, books, all that. It's really up to you. But if you really want to grow your skills, you've got to go up into that 50 to 100 hour a year mark. Imagine that if I said, take 100 hours and learn something. You could learn a pretty significant something in 100 hours, right? You can't become the master of data warehousing. You can't become the master of performance tuning, but you could be much further along. Because think about how much you're going to learn this week in half that time, right? And if you really want to make a career step, it's 200 plus hours. So what I find is a lot of people look at that and go, oh, sure, I can do 200 hours. No problem, 200 hours, right? And then I say, show me on the calendar where you're going to do that time, right? So 200 hours, basically, we're talking about 2 hours a week, right? We'll take a couple weeks off for vacation. 2 hours a week. Where's the 2 hours a week going to come from, right? Right? Especially if you decide to up it and you go, hey, you know what, honey, I'm just going to come home from work and every day from 6 to 7, I'm just going to go in my office and read. No, you'll be out here helping with dinner, taking care of the kids, taking out the garbage. If you want to do that stuff, you do it when we go to bed at 10, right? And so you have to really think about, am I willing to give something up? Maybe you play poker one night a week. You go to the gym, you go, can I fit this in, or do I have to give up something that's maybe really important to me in order to do this? So this is where you really have that heart-to-heart talk with yourself and with your spouse to go, I'd like to do 200 hours, but can I sustain that? Can I do that for the year? And am I going to get there by doing it a couple hours a week, or is it really going to be I'm going to go to one class a quarter and it's going to be 40-hour chunks? But you have to come up with this time budget, and you have to be honest with yourself about where you're going to get that time, right, before you go any further, right? And don't think you have to do that 200 hours a year, right? You just have to do something, and that's when we iterate. Now, the next one, of course, is I'm sure the one that you want to hear about is the money, right? How much money does it take? And the truth is, I don't know. You're not going to know until you get into it. But it's really that discussion of going, how much are you willing to invest? So I've got some different ranges up there. So let me ask you this. Suppose that, I picked one of you out of the crowd and said, you know what, I'll give you $5,000 to invest in yourself. Give you $5,000 to invest in yourself in some kind of training, professional development. How would you spend that? And would it increase your annual salary by $5,000 a year? Even $2,500 a year? What's your ROI? Because that's what you have to think about, right? We try not to, we go in and tell the boss, hey, you got to send me to this summit because it's got this incredible ROI. And the boss says, well, does it, right? Show me, right? So imagine when you start writing the check, right? And you go, a couple $1,000s, travel and all that. I see a class over here. I want to go to this class, learn something about performance tuning, data warehousing, some new topic. You have to really go, how much am I willing to spend, and can I get the return on that? Because most of us, maybe we could do $5,000 one year, right, when we're trying to change direction, make some kind of leap. But odds are you're not going to spend $5,000 every year, right? It's just hard, right? I mean, if you're making in that, 50 to 110 range, pulling $5,000 out of there every year for education, that's a tough sell, right? It's hard to justify. On the low end, of course, you can spend zero. There's a ton of free resources out there, right? SQL Server Central, SQL Team, SQL Tips, my own SQL Share, stuff that PASS provides, SQL Saturday, 24 hours of PASS. There's a lot of free stuff out there. It depends on where you're at, whether that's what you need or not, right? Sometimes you want to supplement it with books. I buy a lot of used books, right? That's a good way to stretch $250. $250 will take you to a couple $99 seminars, that come around periodically. There's a lot of ways to do some good with a fairly small amount of money, right? So let's say you look at this and you go, I'll go $1,000. I'll spend $1,000 on myself. That doesn't seem unreasonable. Call it $100 a month. That certainly sounds reasonable. Now you get to sit down with your spouse and decide, where does that $100 come out of the budget? Is that the $100 a month you've been putting away for vacation, or the upgrade to the carpet in the family room, right? How do you get that $100? That's a fair question. And most spouses are going to go, well, how are we going to get this money back? You say you're investing, where does this money come back? Now, the truth is, some of the investment you're making is just job security, career security. You're making sure that you stay relevant. So it's not always spend $1, get $1, get $2 back. But at the same time, if you're going to spend $5,000, if you're going to invest it, you have to think about, how do I get this back? What's the return that I'm getting? How can I show that? And if that sounds like a hard conversation, it is, right? But it's a good conversation, because you need someone to keep you honest. Because I suspect most of us, if we could just spend $5,000 a year, we would do it cheerfully. We'd be going to classes and seminars, and we'd have stacks of books, right? We would do that because we love to learn. It's who we are. So at this point, you've put a lot of thought into, where am I at? What do I want to be? What's my brand? I'm a business, right? How am I going to take care of me? You've identified how much time you have for the next 12 months and how much money. So now comes an even more exasperating exercise. We've got to slice the pie. We've got to decide, out of all the different things that we want to work on, how do I allocate time and money? And so I just kind of made something up here. So I put in here, for someone who wants to work on certifications, they want to spend a little time on new features, right? We've got Denali, SQL 2012 coming out. We certainly want to have some familiarity with the features. Maybe some networking time, presenting. And then it's a little hard to see. I think I didn't do a good job on the colors on this slide, but the past summit is more than 50% of my time, right? So even if I want to do a lot of networking, the problem is the past summit is more than 50% of my time investment in this. Now, I would tell you what human nature is, and you'll recognize this as soon as I say it, is we'll just go back and make the pie bigger. Right? And that's where it's that iterative conversation, because you look at this and go, no, I got to go to the past summit, and I got to go to the user group every month, and I got to do this, and then you add up all the hours, and it's like 320 hours. That's when you go back and you look at your calendar and go, okay, all right, I know what I really need. Where am I going to get the 320 hours? And you go, I can't do 320 hours. Something's got to go, right? And that's the same kind of thing you do in the world of project management at work, right? The boss wants everything, now, faster, and you go, I can only do so much with what we have, right? You've got to pick, you've got to choose what we do first and how far we go. So, you've got to have your list of all the ideas, and you want to leave a little room in here for the things you don't know about. And in terms of keeping score, you have to decide, for example, does this time include the user group time? Or is that some other bucket of time, right? You just have to figure out how you're keeping score. But slicing the pie is really a good way to see, in the end, are you aligning with your goals? As you've thought about where you're going, if you look up here and you go, well, I'm going to spend 80% of my time on networking, but my goal is to be an MCM, well, I'm misaligned, right? Yes, sir, you have a question. I got you. So this was, I think, this was not mine. This was something I was coaching someone on, and we did a little bit of graphing, for someone who wanted to evolve their community presence and get out and do some more stuff, but they also had some intermediate goals. For most people, presenting and writing are much lower. You got to be further along in your career. You're at that point where you're pretty comfortable and you're looking to grow in a different way, and then they could become very important to you, and we'll talk about that a little bit today.
And the second question, if I could, if it's off topic, we can talk about this later. You have technical certifications. What is your opinion on the value of technical Microsoft certifications?
Okay, so his question is about the value of certifications. So I would say the first thing I'll tell you is you're probably not going to get a job because you hold a certification, right? The second thing I would tell you is most HR departments like certifications. It's something they can check the box, right? That's okay, right? It seems like that. I see them mainly as a tiebreaker, right? When it comes to interviews, you kind of got a couple candidates who go, this person went out and invested some time to get this, and that makes me feel good that they do professional development, and being a professional development guy, that speaks to me, right? It may not speak to everybody else. Certifications are a hugely great way to drive learning. You know, we talk about goals. Think about what a great goal it is to say, I'm just going to take this exam, right? I'm going to spend 50 hours and I'm going to pass this exam. You just have to think about, does passing that exam and all the studying that takes you to it, does that align with your career goals? Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. It may mean that you look at 4 exams and you go, you know, this one helps me. This one I'm not interested in, so I'm not going to worry about getting the certification. I'm just going to take the exam that drives learning, because it gives you a concrete goal, something you can point to. There's resources out there that are focused on it. Especially for beginners or people that are changing focus, I think those certifications are a huge help. I think they're a huge help. The only time I think that they probably convert to money is if you go all the way down the road of the MCM. Right now, in my mind, the only way the MCM converts to money is if you work for a consulting type company. If you work for, you know, Fortune 500 Inc. and you go get your MCM and come back, I'm guessing they give you a $1,000 bonus or something and say, thanks, go back to work, right? Because, you know, you can only be worth so much to them, right? Just generally. So hopefully that's a quick answer on certification. Yes, in the back. Great, so let me see if I can get that right. His comment was that for partners, there's some additional value because they have to have so many MCPs, whatever certifications on staff in order to keep that partner level. And so certainly that changes the game, right? And that's really understanding what do you bring to the table as a business, as an employee, that makes you worth something to them. So you saw me slice the pie one way. Now I'm slicing it again, only this time about money. So in this case, I had my notional budget, and look at what happened. I decided to go to the PASS Summit, and that's where I spent all my money. And if I decide that's what I want to do, that's okay. I mean, I like coming here. You know, it's a tremendous learning opportunity. It's a big social thing, right? But on some years, I might have to look at that and go, you know, I'm trying to learn this business intelligence thing. I need to take that money and go to a class, because that's the fastest way to learn when I'm trying to learn in a hurry, is to spend the money for someone to just take me through it, right? Now, again, the impulse here is to go, well, let's just make the pie bigger, right? $2,500 wasn't enough. Well, let's just make that a $3,500 pie. And if you can do that, that's fine, right? But that's why you go through the loop. You think about what you're going to do, how much it's going to cost, and then you might go back and go, you know, well, maybe I won't do the pre-con, or maybe I'll share a room with someone. Right? You know, maybe I'll register this year for next year's summit because I know I can get it for $9.99, and that will give me back some money in my budget. Right? So there are all the ways that you look at that, but at the end, you slice the pie one way for resources, right, for time, the other way for money, and then you go, now I'm getting closer to making it all work. And we've done all of this without really getting into really deep details about what we're going to learn yet. We're still fairly high level. So as you think about how you're going to spend your time and the money, you also have to understand what works for you. How many of you out here like to learn by watching videos? Anybody? Some. How many of you like to learn from books? How many of you think it makes a difference if you're a beginner on a topic? Is it easier to read out of a book if you're a beginner or if you're further along? Right? Absolutely. And so you look at that and you go, for different topics, I might want to learn different ways. Like I love magazines, right? I mean, we only have one in the SQL Server space, but I read MSDN magazine. I look at some other technical stuff. You know, whenever I have an interest, I look for magazines, and they're not expensive overall, so there's something I can usually fit into my budget. You know, short articles and blog posts are a great way to do that targeted learning, you know, 5 or 10 minutes a day. You know, and that's good for what I call maintenance learning, or for learning how to solve one good problem. But if I really want to learn a skill, if I want to learn how to do, you know, integration services, right, or I want to learn how to do HA, to me, I need to invest at least in the book, maybe in a class, right? Sometimes I'll find a seminar, you know, something like service broker, replication, maybe it's something you could do in a day. But it's not enough to just go, where can I learn it? But you have to say, will that work for me? Because if you can't learn from a book, And a lot of people struggle with this because the books, let's face it, they're not enthralling, right? They're not fun reading. You may say, you know what, I'm going to have to find a class. I'm going to shop for discounts. I'm going to look around. I'm going to find some training CDs. I'm going to do something. But it doesn't make sense to spend money on books if books don't work for you, right? It's the same thing. Once you know your budget and how you learn, then you can go, well, where do I learn? Where do I spend? What do I want to do there? And you'll notice I've got on here hands-on, right? It's important to remember that we're going to have to spend some time. So, part of that learning may be that you have to take some of your budget to invest in that home lab, right? Maybe you're going to need 2 PCs so you can actually build servers and cluster them. You're going to need extra NICs and cables, some other stuff. Maybe you want something that looks like a SAN, a kind of a NAS device you can treat like that. You have to factor that stuff into money, space, all of those issues. But all of that is, how do you learn best, right? Because for me, there's nothing like doing it, right? I mean, I can read the book, but at some point, I need to solve a problem. I need to actually put my hands on that. So far, so good? All right. So we've gotten to this point, and we've talked about the mechanics, and now I want to kind of bring you back and talk about some of the things that we might add to this, depending on where you want to go in your career over the next year, the next 5 years. So the first one is networking, right? And most of you have done some of that today. Networking is one of those things, to me, it's 1, 2, 3% of the time that I spend, and it's often parallel time. I'm here, I'm learning, I do a little networking while I'm waiting, right, in the slack time. Early in your career, you shouldn't spend a lot of time on networking, although you should spend some time. But as you get further along, those relationships matter more because those are the places where you trade ideas, right, where you learn stuff. It's not always about finding the next job. A lot of times it's being out there so when someone needs help, you can help them, right? It's having that network. And networks happen in a lot of different ways. They happen on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, people you work with. You have a lot of different groups. But I would encourage you to always have a little portion of your plan devoted to networking just to remind you that you need to do that and set yourself a goal. Maybe the goal is to say, this year I'm going to add 20 people to my LinkedIn list, right? Say 2 a month. Right? I'm going to go to the user group. I'm going to make an effort to meet 1 new person. Now, I'm going to look around the office every month and go, who here haven't I connected with on LinkedIn that maybe they'll leave and I want to keep up with them? Right? You set some goals associated with networking. Now, the next one is writing and communication skills. Right? And so for most DBAs, how important are writing and communication skills? How many people would say very important? That's right. We work in a business that requires a certain amount of precision, but it's a certain kind of communication, right? It's typically internal. It's technical team to technical team. It's technical team to manager. But how many of you would be comfortable if your boss, you get back to the office on Monday and said, hey, I want you to come in and do a presentation for a client that we're about to take on. I want you to talk to them about some stuff, and these guys aren't technical. How many of you think you do okay on that conversation? That's right. It takes a little practice, right? It's kind of wrong to throw it at you on Monday morning to start with, but the truth is it takes some practice. So the only way to get better at writing and communicating is to do it. And so then you have to figure out, well, where can I do that? Now, my favorite way to teach people, honestly, is blogging, because you have to make it public, which means you have to put some time into it. It's not like jotting out an instant message, right, which can be hugely informal, or even an internal email. It's certainly not the only way, but you have to learn to take complex ideas and present them in a way to see if people can follow them. And it takes a lot of repetition to get good at it. So it's not something you do year 1, year 2, year 3, right? Not at the beginning of your career. You've got to be past the point where you're thinking about syntax, where you're comfortable in your ability to quickly acquire, I'm going to learn full text search because I need it next week. That's the place where you go, now I need to work on those skills because I need to make sure that I can tell my manager about complex problems because he's going to forward it on to the CIO. And the CIO may understand technology, but I need to explain what we need. This is why I need X dollars. This is why we're trying to do it this way. There's a lot of other ways to do it, especially on the technical side, and that's to write for sites like SQL Server Central. Right? If you solve an interesting problem or you come up with an interesting approach, you write that up, and that's a great way to put that out there again in public so it makes you sweat, makes you put real effort into it, because when you put it out there, you want to be proud of it. And for that first one, you're going to labor away like crazy, but if you do a second one and a third one, you'll find that you can get there faster and that's the learning cycle that we want. Right? So you have to just think about, as you build your PDP, to go, how important is it to me to improve my writing and communication skills? And if it's a little bit important or a lot important, how do I think I can go about improving those skills? What's going to work for you? Right? Could be something like Toastmasters. Right? Doesn't necessarily have to be all writing. It could be learning how to explain something, how to do a presentation. So the next one I've got up here is leadership and management training. So how many of you that are not managers expect to be a manager in 5 years or less? A few of you, right? So if you're going to be a manager, one of the things I would tell you is you've got to prepare right now, because what's going to happen is you're going to be working along, and one day there's going to be a vacancy there. And if you're ready, you're going to get the job. And if you're not ready, you're not going to get the job. That's really as simple as it works, right? Because it's not like some other things. From their perspective, if you want to be a manager, you're going to show initiative, you're going to figure out what you need to learn, and you're going to tackle it so that you're prepared. And if you haven't done any of those things, they don't want to hear from you that, oh, I can learn that, right? They're just not going to do that. So you have to start thinking about, do I need that training now? Does my business have a leadership training class? Most of them do, right? They train young leaders. Can I go to the local college and take a seminar? A lot of, MBA programs will have those leadership things. Are there ways that I can be a leader in the organization to say, hey, boss, can I lead that next project? We got a big upgrade coming. Can I be the lead on that, and I'll report back to you? I want to get some experience leading people so that when that opportunity comes up, you're not doing it from a cold start. Because the failure rate for IT managers is incredibly high, right? And you all know that, right? Because what happens is we promote the alpha dog, and the alpha dog doesn't want to stop being the alpha dog, right? They want to stay rooted in the technical skills, and they've put in no effort to figure out how to work with their peers, which are now other managers, often non-technical managers, how to deal with people, how to deal with the awkward social situations, all those things that happen at work that have nothing to do with the fact that you can tune a query faster than anyone alive. Right? So if you're going to go down that path, start thinking about, formal training and informal training. You read some leadership books. You think about people whose styles you like and start to think about, why does that style work? Right? Because some people have low-key styles. That wouldn't work for me. I tend to be more direct. Right? So I would look for someone who has a style that I think would be closer to what would work for me, but that I see works for them, and say, can I emulate that? How did they respond to this situation? I just start that path of walking down there going, I'm going to take a little step in year one, but I'm going to start to go faster as I make progress. Formal education is a tough one, right? So odds are, from my viewpoint at least, getting a formal education in IT is probably not going to change your salary. If you're sitting here today without a 4-year degree or without an MBA, odds are today, if you went out and got that degree and had it on Monday, it wouldn't change your compensation at all today, right? When it starts to matter is if you want to move into upper management. Not managing the DBA team or managing the dev team or anything like that, but if you really want to move to the director level and up, then sometimes, depending on where you work, that education can make a difference just in terms of checking the box, but also understanding the topics that they talk about, right? The CapEx, the OpEx, the depreciation, all those things that you cover at those levels. And if you want to go to the CIO level, right, if you want to go to the top, and that's a great goal, it's almost required that you have an MBA, right? It's one of those things that, could you do it without it? Sure, but they go, well, why don't you have it? And there's really no good reason, right, other than the time. The hard part here is getting that degree, getting the MBA. That's 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So you've got to think really hard today about what opportunities might come along, about how life might evolve for you, and go, am I taking the steps I need so that I'm ready 6 years from now, that if our CIO retires, I'm ready to put my name in the hat. I'm qualified. I've done the pre-work to say I'm an interesting candidate for this job because I know the company. Yes, sir. Absolutely. So his question is whether getting an MBA, something he can get at fairly low cost, would help him to transition more into a consulting role, working for a consulting company to go out and get business. So the answer is, I'm going to hedge here. It's not going to hurt you. But what I see in terms of successful consultants really has more to do with, technical competency, I think, is assumed. Either you know it or you can learn it fairly quickly because it's a tweak, right? But it's really the ability to listen and understand the real problem, because a lot of times the client's giving you the solution instead of the problem, right? And you have to look into that. And also to understand what will work for their environment. I work with some consultants now that just, they only know how to solve the problem one way, and I don't want to do it that way, and they just want to keep beating on me until I change, right? So out of all the skills you might acquire, I would say it's that listening and the consultative mindset. Listen, let me help you solve the problem, all those things. I think those are more important. The hard part is the only way you get them is by doing it, right? It's chicken and the egg. I think hard about that. The chance to get that at low cost, that's a huge opportunity. But, just take some time and think about, where am I going? It's not going to hurt you. You just have to go, I can spend 500 or 1,000 hours doing this, or 500 or 1,000 hours learning something else, which seems like, maybe the sure bet or, the bigger win if it works. You weigh that back and forth. All right? So the next one is teaching and presenting. So I bring this up, right, because I'm standing up here today trying to share some knowledge with you. And this is a great place to get to in your career when you've learned some stuff and you want to give back, right? I think, the SQL community is really built on that. But whether you're doing SQL Server or not, it's a good way to polish those presentation skills that you might need for clients, right, to earn business, right? But it's also a way to build your brand, right, to let people know what you specialize in. It's a chance to meet prospective clients, people that are going to refer work to you. It's a reason to talk to your clients about things you've done lately. There's a lot of reasons to get up here and do that, because presenting takes practice, right? I mean, I've done it a lot, and I wouldn't claim to be more than okay at it. I work hard at it every time. I try some new things. You can't just do it once or twice and think you've mastered it, right? In my mind, when you've done it 50 times or 100, you're getting comfortable, right? And every time you do it, you make some mistakes. You're like, why did I say that? Right? But it's a good way to give back, if for nothing else, right? Regardless of what you can do with your career, it's a great way to stay involved in doing that. And then at the bottom, we've got professional organizations and events. And I'm thinking you're already sold on that, but I want to make sure, right? Because, you're here as, members of PASS. I bet most of you participate in local user groups. How many of you have been to a SQL Saturday, just out of curiosity? Right? So there's a lot of places out there where you can participate to learn more about your profession, so you can find out things about, what do people doing similar jobs make? Is my job normal or unusual, right? What things should I be learning? You may well want to participate in organizations outside of SQL Server. You may want to drop in on the .NET user group from time to time, just to kind of keep an eye on what's going over in that developer space. We talked about Hadoop this week. Maybe you want to see if there's a local Hadoop, group, and go over there and just look in once in a while. You may not go all the time, right? But I love going to code camps. It's great for me to see what's going on in the developer world, because at some point they're going to consume the services I offer, and they're always doing new stuff. And sometimes they use, sometimes they abuse the product that I work with, and I like to see that coming. I like to understand why they want to make those changes, right? So put some time into your PDP for this, right? Don't make it a chore, though, if I could just give you that bit of advice. If you want to go to the user group, there's nothing wrong with saying, the user group meets 11 times a year. My goal is to go 6 times. Go to the meetings that have content that interests you. And if you look out there and you go, oh, look, it's introduction to writing queries, I'm not going to go tonight. You know what? That's okay. It's great if you go and you do networking and you mentor some people. There's a lot of ways to get value out of it, but it's also not the end of the world if you go, you know what? I'm just going to take the night off and go home and do something else. Nothing wrong with that. Let's see how we're doing on time. So I think you probably all get about networking, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I would just tell you that, especially for beginners, when I talk about networking, what I hear from people is they go, well, how do I know if I'm going to get anything back from it? You don't. It's absolutely a leap of faith. Right, so the trick is to do that 10 or 15 minute investment every week slowly grow your network, catalog it, right? But don't just keep your eye on what you're going to get out of it, because it comes back in the strangest ways, right? I mean, the job, the contract I work on right now is for someone that I last worked for in 2004, right? She called me up and said, hey, come help me with this, right? That's a network, right? You don't know that that's going to happen, but it's really great when it does. And as I look back about all the things I've done over the last 10 years, almost all of them have been driven by a network. I talked about the writing, and I put a slide in here, so especially when you go back and look at the slide afterward, because I suspect for some of you, you're going to find that to be worth doing, is when you get down to writing, it's really about being able to do it clearly and concisely. It's not about writing a book, but it's about telling the story in a way that walks them through that clearly, so they go, what are you trying to tell me? You've seen it at work, right? You send out an email with 3 questions, and they answer the first one, right? Or you go, hey, do you want to do this or that? And they go, yes, right? Sometimes you have to realize that your readers perhaps aren't the most sophisticated, or they're in a hurry, and you have to change your writing style to work for that. But when you do your writing, don't get focused on the word count. Think about the frequency. That would be the thing I would tell you. I have a friend that's here that she blogged for a while, and then she stopped. She said she just didn't feel like she was getting good at that. I said, well, how many blog posts did you do? And she said, about 50. I said, well, that's not enough. And she said, well, how many is enough? I said, do 500, and then we'll talk. Right? Right? Because it takes repetition to get to that point where you get past the syntax. Right? When you're writing that first 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 articles or blog posts or whatever, you're kind of caught up in the mechanics of it. It's only when you do it over and over and over that you get past all that and you can just write. And that's where you find the power. Now, I left this slide in here, but it really doesn't fit very good, so I hope you'll just bear with me while I just talk about it for 1 second. I like blogging as a way to do brand building, as a way to build your presence in the community, to learn how to write, but it's not a good fit for everybody, right? It's absolutely not a good fit for everybody. If you'd like to learn a blog, I'd love to sit down and talk with you this week and just talk to you about some of the things I do and why I think it's good for you. But whether it should be part of your PDP, when I first started doing this, I thought, it should absolutely be in there. But the truth is, this is an optional item, and it's way down on the list, right? If you want to do it, I'm telling you it's going to be good for you. But don't think it's one of the have-to-haves. Out of all the things you do, I would rather see you do some kind of writing and some kind of networking. Do this if and when you're ready for it. Question?
Sorry, when you said writing on your last slide, I kind of thought about blogging as a natural extension. Now you're focusing on blogging, and I understand that. So let's go back, and you don't have to correct me.
No, absolutely.
But you talked about writing these articles. Well, who's going to read the articles? Who's going to comment on them? How do you get that?
Okay, so his question was, if I write stuff, how do I get comments? Who's going to read it? So we're going to step away from blogs. We'll just cover that. We'll leave that topic done for now. So let's say the first thing, let's say you've done something interesting at work. You write that up as a one-page article, send it to my friend Steve Jones at SQL Server Central. What Steve will do is he's an editor. He will look at that and see if you did a good job of telling the story, and odds are that first time it's going to come back marked up. And it's not going to be the grammar markup. He's going to come back and say, I don't understand this, you're not telling this story, maybe you need an image here, right? He's going to give you some coaching, but that's where it's going to stop. Then you're either going to do it or you're going to let it die. Most of the time the edits aren't hard. You're going to submit that back, and one day, a couple months in the future, you're going to be on the front page of the SQL Server Central or SQL Team newsletter, and there's going to be a couple 100,000 people that look at that newsletter, and of them, a few thousand are actually going to read the article. Of those, 5 or 10 or 50 or 100 are going to look at that and go, good job, or man, you got it wrong, or you know what, I see that, but I've done it a different way, right? It's really putting that out there for peer review. And I would just tell you, if you do that kind of writing, the conversations attached to those writings are more valuable than the writing you do, right? If you don't read the discussions attached to those now, I'm telling you, you're missing out on that, because that's where it really gets fleshed out, and that's where a lot of the serious learning goes on. Yes, sir.
So I'm curious how, because it kind of straddles blogging and networking, how do you see reading? It's not deep technical writing for the effort, but how do you see that fitting into all of
Okay, so the question is, what do I think about Twitter and tweeting? So I have a Twitter account. I'm not a big Twitter guy. I think it's very effective for location-based events like this. I think it's a great way, especially if you work by yourself, to feel like you're part of a group, right? To kind of have some social chatter. I think it works good for that. It's certainly a way, a low effort, low cost way to kind of meet some people sort of online, but I don't think it's very effective at the real networking. Not everyone would agree with me, in fairness, though. I think a lot of it is how much effort you put into it, and I probably don't try hard enough. But if I had a choice of you building your LinkedIn list or working on Twitter, I would tell you build real contacts. But hopefully it's not either or. Okay. It's a fair question. So his question is how do I let people know what I do or where I've improved at? How do I blow my own horn in a way that's not offensive? And it's a style question, right? We all learned to do it one way. The thing I would tell you is if you've ever sat on the side of the table as a manager, is you don't know what your employees do most of the time. That's the whole point, right? Is I want to trust you. Hey, you know what? I need you to build a new server and move it over here and do this. I don't want to come look over your shoulder. So if you do something interesting or you find a new way to do it or you help somebody solve a problem, odds are the only time I hear about anything is when it goes wrong. And that's okay, right? That's not even cynical. That's just the way the world works. So you have to find a way to tell your clients, right, this is what I'm doing for you, right? And if you look at your boss as a client, it really starts to change the conversation. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, look, I did some interesting stuff for you this week. You have to figure out how to deliver that in a way that works for them and you. And you have to experiment, right? Because sometimes it can be that once-a-week update. Hey, just sending you some notes. Here's what I got done this week. Found a really interesting solution to this, blah, blah, blah. Done, right? I like to drop in. You know, I see the boss is off the phone. Got a few minutes, I'll drop in. Hey, you know, can I talk to you for a minute? Let me tell you about some stuff I'm working on. Yep. It is. So I'm going to paraphrase. So his comment there is about the fact that DBAs are really back office people. We're not seen until something goes wrong. You have to work at that. You have to realize that. So the first thing is to go, who does it matter that knows about what I do? Do I need the CIO to know? Do I need my boss to know? You know, what are the dynamics of the relationship? You know, who do I want to know? I'll tell you, one of my favorite techniques as a DBA, though, is I walk around twice a day looking for work. You know, what I found is I'm usually in a cube way off in the back, you know, often in a secure area, and people won't come find me unless there's something really wrong. But if I'm walking around, developers stop me all the time. Hey, can you help me write this query? Or, hey, how does this work? I get a lot of business from being visible, from walking around, letting people know that I'm interested, and remembering every day I'm in a customer service business. You know, people will say, hey, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I go, no, that's what I do, right? You need something, you come find me. That's what I do. And that attitude will quickly percolate. It's amazing how fast that will transform an organization if you're out moving around and you're not just the guy back in the cube that, you know, is doing the secret mojo. Okay, so his problem is he's done a great job of publicizing himself, but now he's incredibly popular. People want his help, they want his time, and that's hurting his ability to do work. Right, so that's one of those times you have to step back and look and go, are they really getting value out of the time that you're spending with them? Because if they are, you know, you go back to the business and go, listen, these people are asking for my time all the time. I think it's important. We need another person. right? And, you know, sometimes those conversations don't work, but at the end of the day, what's nice about being a DBA is you can do one thing at a time. That's not how managers work. Managers have multiple priorities, but as a DBA, right, as a consultant, you just go, what's the most important thing you want me to do, right? And you make them do it. You go, look, I got 3 things. What do you want me to work on? All of them. No. Which one do you want me to work on first, right? And you kind of force them to prioritize. And that way, if they say, no, do this work, then you go, hey, I'd love to help you, but boss says I got to do this first. Certainly not as easy as that, but it's a very common challenge. All right, so I'm running a little behind, so I'm going to try to go just a little bit faster. But if I miss any questions or anything, please see me afterward. I'm happy to spend as much time afterward just in case. So as we talk about professional development plans, and I have a lot of these conversations, one of the things I hear is people just literally get stressed out about trying to keep up with the changes in technology, all right, the IT treadmill. You know, there might have been a day back in SQL Server 6.5 when you could master everything that shipped in the box. I think we're long past the day when you could master every facet of SQL Server, right? And they keep adding more stuff, more new feature, more complexity to old features. It's a little bit crazy trying to keep up. And so, you know, when you're young and ambitious, you can do it for a while. But eventually you feel like you're just going to collapse just from trying to keep up with the new features. And of course, every once in a while you get to learn a great feature like English query or notification services that then, you know, kind of disappears into the ether. And you're like, wow, that's great. I spent 50 hours to learn something that's not even here anymore. So what I've got up here is a really pragmatic or cynical strategy. I'll let you decide which one of those 2 words you like. Learn the buzzwords. Just take the time to understand what features they put in the box and read the 3-minute to 5-minute description. Right? So I'll give you an example. How many of you here know what Stream Insight does? Okay? So Stream Insight was added in R2, and it's sort of an in-memory database analysis tool. It ships with SQL Server, but it really has nothing to do with SQL Server. It's really designed for things like when somebody clicks on an ad, you can go, well, I know they came from this page, and they clicked here, and so I want to send them here, and you can decide that on the fly without ever touching the disk. Most of us are never going to live in that world, so we don't care, right? It's just totally foreign to what we do. So about a year ago, though, I had a client who does internet device monitoring. They literally only care about the last 10 seconds worth of data because all they're capturing is state changes, and they're essentially looking to go, hey, look, the generator was running, and now it's not, right? If they crash, they just restore an empty copy of the database and start monitoring again. The problem is when they do inserts and they do these 2,000 devices, basically they pull them about once a second. They're doing a tremendous number of inserts, and they've got a trigger on there that's about this long because they have to do all this in real time or as real time as they can get. And so, you know, we've tuned and tried to get it down, and so they call me up and go, hey, can we turn off logging? I said, no, it doesn't work that way. If you want to use SQL Server, you have to leave the logging on, but they need all the query dynamics. They need a lot of the stuff. They don't want to just move to a text file. So when Stream Insight came out, you know, and I read a little bit about it, I called them back. I said, hey, you should take a look at this because with Stream Insight, you can take that 2,000 events per second and very early on filter out all the ones that are noise and just throw them away. Don't ever write them to disk. Now you're down to a couple hundred events that are interesting. Now, I don't know how to do it. I can go learn it if you want to pay me for it, but I'm just telling you, here's a case of where I know a buzzword and I can map it to your problem. Now you can go take a look. Think about how often it happens that people just don't know what's in the box. How many of your developers know what Service Broker is? And they're out there rolling their own queuing system. Take the time to learn the buzzwords just to understand the features that are available to you. Out of those, you're going to find some that you go, no, I need to learn this one. But some of them, you just need to know what it does. And then, you know, you talk about message queuing at work, the conversation goes like this. Go, boss, you know, there's this thing in the box called Service Broker that's designed for queuing. It scales like crazy. I've never worked on it, but if you're interested, I can spend a day or two on it and come back and give you some details. Nobody's going to look at you and go, you incompetent moron, you're supposed to know that already. They're going to go, that's great, you're adding value. You can tell me about something that I wouldn't know and most people wouldn't know. You're telling me something that would really help me, at least gives me an option. Taking this approach takes away the stress of trying to keep up. You still have to put in some time, right? We can't just be about buzzwords, right? We have to be able to do real work. but it helps you focus in a way to say, I'm going to learn a couple things, but I'm going to keep the rest of it kind of within arm's reach. All right, and I'm definitely running long. If anyone needs to leave, please feel free. It's 4:15, so I don't want to hold you up if you need to get to the next session, but I'll try to finish here. So when I talk about branding, I just want to add here that it's not about necessarily being famous. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to go out and be a consultant, it helps to have a public image. Within your company, it's just about being known for what you do. Are you reliable? Can you get things done? Are you forward-thinking? All those things that kind of contribute to their perception of what you are, because it's kind of interesting how often what we think we are isn't how people see us. It's amazing, I think, how often those two images don't come anywhere close to matching. So almost done. So here's the last one. So if you've really thought about the PDP, and we're almost at the end of that, and building a PDP and adopting some of that mindset that I am a business, I'm going to own my career. Here's the final step. Treat your manager like a client. So imagine that a year ago, your current boss hired you. Said, I'm going to hire you for a 1-year contract. I want you to come in and do this, this, and this. So imagine Monday, you're going to go in and you're going to renegotiate your contract, right? You want another year contract and you want 10% more money. Your boss thinks you've done a pretty good job, but he'd like to pay you 10% less. Think about how that conversation might go. Would you be having a good conversation on Monday? Would you be ready to go look at all the places where I've delivered extra value? Right? Look at how I'm saving you from doing this, or how the money I saved here, hey, I caught that thing where they were going to over-provision the server and I saved you $50,000. You know what? I'm just looking for a 10% raise. But it changes the whole approach to how you talk to them, right? And to me, it's a really long offshoot of the professional development plan, right? It goes beyond the PDP, but once you start thinking of yourself as a business and owning your development, then you start thinking about what skills can I market to my employer, what skills can I charge my employer for, and am I providing them good customer service, right? So it's a little extra slide, a little bit off track, but I hope you'll take that away and think about how does that integrate with changing your point of view into really building a good PDP. So here's the final slide. So people go, okay, well, what does a PDP look like? You know, you talk about writing it down. What does it look like? And the truth is it doesn't matter, right, other than I think you have to write it down and you have to put it on your calendar. Write it in Notepad, Word, Excel, whatever you want to do. You have to write it down and you have to put that on your calendar. What I did up here is I just put together a simple one in Excel, and you can see this is a couple years ago when I just did a mock-up. I put up here how I was going to slice my pie. You see I've got hours and I've got my budget. And then I just started running a log, right? I just started putting time in here, right? I think it's incredibly important that you do this, because what's going to happen to you is at some point you're going to have a baby. You know, you're going to have something go wrong at home you have to fix. You're going to have a project where you go dark for 60 days, and you're going to fall off the wagon. You're not going to do your PDP for a while. And so eventually you're going to come up for air. That reminder is going to pop up on the calendar, and you're going to go, I'm totally off track. That's good, right? Now, you just stop and go, are my goals still the same? Do I just slide everything out 2 months? Or have my goals changed and should I reset that? But you just get back going again, right? Don't think this is a pact that you just can't abandon. You can change this at any time. It's a guide, but writing it down kind of keeps you honest. I'll also tell you, just from experience, it's a great way when you're doing that negotiation with your spouse, talking about how much time and money, is to say, well, I'm going to keep track. I'm going to show you. I'm putting in the time. Here's where I spend the money, right? It's kind of looking at that as this is the way I run my business, is I don't just make these ad hoc decisions, but I'm executing on a plan. I can measure my progress. I've seen a lot of writers that log their word count every day because they know they need 80,000 words, and every day they go, here's how many words, and they're looking at that, and you know, if that graph is flat, they're like, hey, you know, I'm not getting it done. So just write it down in some form. And I will say, if you build a PDP and you'd like me to look at it, send you back some comments, I'm happy to do that, right? Sometimes that little extra bit of feedback really helps. So my quick summary here is, as you build this, I want you to look beyond your current job, and I want you to look beyond just technology. Now, technology is important. I'm not trying to talk you out of that. Remember, technology is a big part of what we do, but look beyond that. We're going to identify the resources and the goals, then we're going to write it down. right? We're going to care enough about this to invest a couple hours and write down what our plan is. We're going to put those milestones on our calendar so that we keep up with it because we're serious about it. We're going to document our efforts, and we're going to adjust course anytime we need to because this is our plan. We can share this with people if we want, not share it, it doesn't matter. It's your plan. It's what's going to get you to that goal that you've set. And if you need to renegotiate that goal with yourself, that's absolutely okay. So I've got some contact information up here. I don't have my email address, but you can just send it to me if you want to send me your PDP. Send it to Andy at SQLAndy.com, and I will get back to you within a day or two. So we're a little bit over time. Are there any questions or comments? Everybody have a good time today? All right, so a couple quick reminders. One is PASS has a professional development virtual chapter. There's a couple presentations coming up in November, December. One about communications, and I think the other one about leadership. Mark Caldwell is the guy who runs that virtual chapter, so he's here this week. You might catch up with him and talk to him about that. But definitely look for that. It's an online presentation, and they'll have some good content up there. The final thing before you leave, I hope you'll fill out the eval. There's some papers out there you can fill out and drop in that bin over there, or there's a code on there that you can scan and just fill it online. But thank you all for coming today, and thank you for letting me run just a little bit long.